Hey y'all, it's Dr. Ashley Gaddy Robbins. It's Intergenerational Month, so let's talk. As a scholar of systems and identity, and as a mom who has 3 generations in her household alone, Millennial, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, identity and generation are my favorite topics to talk about when we think about the workplace and everyday life. And so for the month of September, I'm going to provide intergenerational reels and education and allow us to learn more about the ways in which age affects our everyday life. First, I want to talk about how generations even think about themselves. In the work that I do specifically around Black women, self-identity, self-care, community care are topics that are very important. But before we can talk about care, it's very important to think about how generations even think about themselves. Because of the world that has been around them, different generations have a different attachment or different priority of self. When you ask a baby boomer, who are you? More times than not, a baby boomer is going to self-identify actually through others. They're going to talk about their children. They're going to talk about their grandchildren. They are going to not even think about themselves as a top priority. They're always thinking about and having to have worked for others. If you ask a Gen X, who are you? Chances are a Gen X have really been able to come into their own self-identity and self-awareness and self-knowledge probably later in life. And so if you're talking to a Gen X, they are probably in their heyday, their high life right now. They are really thinking about connection to self, but it came at a later time. And so Gen X has had to think and work for others and prioritize others. And then kind of once they've gotten to a later part of life, they've been able to feel settled and established enough to then prioritize themselves. When you ask a millennial, who are you? A millennial is more self-aware and connected as a priority of self, but they are now coming just now fully into their self-care, restoration, soft life era. And so because millennials have had to witness the effects of baby boomers and Gen X, because millennials have also seen lots of world events happen, right? It's not usually until their later 20s, early 30s that there is a reclamation of self. I say to folks, so millennials have probably spent their early 20s really not liking themselves and having to go through a lot. And then now in their 30s, they're like, wait a second, I know who I am. I'm reclaiming whom I am. For Generation Z, listen, we know who we are from the very beginning. We are proud of who we are. Are we still navigating some internal things, maybe around mental and physical health? Absolutely. But self is a priority. We will walk away from a job if there is not a priority of self in our time. We will say no very quickly. This idea of sacrificing for self for other things is not something that Gen Z is really trying to do. Why is this important for the workplace? It's important for the workplace because if different generations have a different priority of self or a different connection to self-care, then that often shows up in the ways in which they will come to work. While baby boomers are phasing out of the workforce, baby boomers will take on a lot in order to keep the job. They will take on a lot of trauma in the workplace. They will take on a lot of harassment and discrimination because they have to keep their job in order to sustain for others. Gen X is kind of coming up on retirement. So quite honestly, they don't really have a lot of capacity or a lot of care to really get involved in what is unjust in the workplace. And they also have sustained a lot, but they are at their peak right now when it comes to self-care and self-identity. And so they're like, listen, I don't got time for y'all. I'm trying to retire and get out of here. Millennials and Gen Z, however, because there is a deeper, younger connection to self and a priority to self, instead of just taking what is unjust or inequitable in organizations, they are speaking up. While baby boomers may not have had the ability to speak up because they were in terms of survival, Millennial and Gen Z now have an awareness and a flexibility and a determination to fight against an organization about what's not right rather than just taking it. So before we say millennials and Gen Z, they just talk too much. They battle everything. They're just so combative in the workplace. Maybe we should pause and think about the ways in which different generations have prioritized themselves and actually see that we are now seeing a shift in self-advocacy in the workplace, because now generations have been able to reclaim themselves sooner and stand up for what they need. I hope this was helpful. Check out some reels for the rest of September as we go on this intergenerational journey. Peace.